The wind slid across the prairie like a blade, cold and precise, carrying the dry smell of dust and old grass. It moved through the open land without asking permission, whispering through fence posts and rattling the loose tin on the far shed. Eli Mercer stood near the split-rail fence, one hand gripping the weathered wood, the other pressed hard against his side. The pain beneath his ribs throbbed in slow, stubborn pulses, as if it had a will of its own. He breathed shallowly, careful not to give it more space than it already claimed. The sun was dropping fast, dragging long shadows across the pasture. Evening always came quicker than a man expected out here, especially when work wasn't finished. The calf had broken loose an hour ago, spooked by nothing Eli could see, and had torn off toward the arroyo like it was being chased by the devil himself. Eli's eyes followed the faint line in the dirt where the rope had burned the ground before slipping free. He hated unfinished things, hated them more than pain. Behind him, boots crunched softly on gravel. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. He could feel her presence the way you feel a storm coming, subtle, certain. "Don't," Clara said. Her voice wasn't loud. It never needed to be. It carried anyway, steady and clear, cutting through the wind. Eli shifted his weight but didn't look back yet. He spat into the dust, watching it darken the earth. "It still hurts there," she added, closer now. He turned his head slightly, enough to catch her in the corner of his eye. Clara stood a few steps behind him, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, dark hair pinned back but already coming loose from the day's work. There was worry on her face, plain as the lines in the land around them. She'd seen that look on him before, seen what followed it. "It's nothing," Eli said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Just a bruise." Clara shook her head. "You said that yesterday, and the day before." He finally turned to face her, straightening despite the sharp protest from his ribs. The movement sent a brief flash of heat through his side, but he swallowed it down. He'd swallowed worse. "A ranch don't wait because a man's sore," he said. "That calf's out there." "I know," she replied. "But you're hurt." "Hurt ain't dead." "No," she said quietly, "but it can lead there." The words hung between them, heavier than the cooling air. Eli's jaw tightened. He didn't like the way she said things sometimes, too close to truth, too close to fear he kept buried deep. He glanced past her, toward the darkening land, toward the arroyo that cut the prairie like an old scar. "I'll be quick," he said, reaching for the rope coiled on the fence post. "Just need to pull it back. Then I'll rest." Clara stepped forward, placing her hand over his before he could lift the rope. Her fingers were calloused from work, warm despite the cold. The contact made him flinch, not from pain, but from something else he didn't care to name. "Eli," she said, softer now. "You don't always have to prove it." He looked down at their hands, her skin against his. For a moment, the wind seemed to still, like the land itself was waiting. Memories flickered behind his eyes. His father bent over in the field long after his body had given out, refusing help. The long nights alone in this same house after his mother died, after everyone else moved on. Proving it had been all he'd known. "I ain't proving anything," he muttered, though he wasn't sure to whom. "It's just work." Clara searched his face, as if reading something written there he'd forgotten how to hide. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "You don't have to carry it all yourself." Something in him resisted, hard and instinctive. Alone was safer. Alone didn't ask things of you. He gently pulled his hand free from hers and lifted the rope anyway. The weight of it settled into his palm, familiar and grounding. "Don't make this harder than it is," he said. She stepped back, lips pressed together, eyes dark with concern. "I'm not," she replied. "You are." Eli turned away before he could answer, before doubt could sink its hooks any deeper. He tossed the rope over his shoulder and started toward the open field. Each step sent a dull ache through his side, but he welcomed it in a way. Pain was simple. Pain made sense. Behind him, Clara called out once more. "Eli." He stopped but didn't turn. "Please," she said. The word struck him harder than any blow. He stood there, staring out at the wide, empty land, the sky bleeding from gold into purple. For a heartbeat, he considered dropping the rope. Considered listening. Then the calf bawled somewhere in the distance, thin and frightened, and the old habits won. "I'll be fine," he said, and walked on. The grass brushed against his boots as he moved, whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. The wind picked up again, colder now, tugging at his coat, pushing him forward. With every step, the pain sharpened, radiating outward, but Eli kept his pace steady. Slowing down felt too much like stopping. Stopping felt like surrender. As he reached the edge of the arroyo, the land dipped suddenly, and he had to brace himself against a fence post to keep his balance. His breath came out in a hiss through his teeth. He paused there longer than he meant to, head bowed, rope slipping slightly from his grip. For just a second, Clara's voice echoed in his mind, "It still hurts there." He shook his head as if to clear it and tightened his hold on the rope. The calf's cries echoed from below, and duty pulled him forward again. Whatever waited on the other side of this pain, he wasn't ready to face it yet. The wind slid across the prairie like a blade, cold and exact, cutting through the layers of Eli Mercer's coat and finding the ache beneath his ribs with practiced precision. It always knew where to go, that wind. It carried the smell of dry earth, of trampled grass and distant cattle, and it moved unhindered across the open land as if the ranch, the fences, even the men who worked it were nothing more than suggestions. Eli stood near the split-rail fence, fingers curled around the rough wood, knuckles pale. His other hand pressed against his side, not hard enough to draw attention, just enough to keep the pain from spreading too far. The bruise beneath his ribs felt deep, older than it should have been, like it had roots. Every breath tugged at it, every shift of weight reminded him it was there. He had learned long ago how to breathe around pain, how to make space for it without letting it take over. Pain was familiar. Pain was honest. It asked nothing of him except endurance. The sun was sinking fast, dragging long orange and purple shadows across the pasture. The day had slipped through his fingers without his noticing, the way days often did when there was too much to do and too little help. Evening out here didn't arrive politely. It dropped in all at once, cooling the air, quieting the birds, turning the land into something sharper and more dangerous. Eli's eyes followed the faint scar in the dirt where the rope had burned the ground earlier, where the calf had wrenched free and bolted toward the arroyo. He could still hear the startled bawl in his head, thin and panicked. Unfinished work gnawed at him worse than the pain. It always had. Boots crunched softly behind him, measured, careful. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. He knew the sound of her steps as well as he knew his own. Clara never rushed unless she had to. She walked like she was listening to the land, like she respected the ground enough to meet it halfway. "Don't," she said. Her voice was low, steady, carrying through the wind without fighting it. It wasn't a command, not exactly, but it wasn't a request either. Eli's jaw tightened. He stared out across the pasture, watching the light drain from the grass. "It still hurts there," she added, closer now. He shifted his weight, the movement sending a sharp reminder through his side. He exhaled slowly through his nose and spat into the dust, watching it darken the pale earth. He told himself it was nothing. He'd told himself that since the morning he'd taken the blow, careless step, skittish horse, bad angle. Things happened. Men worked through them. "It's nothing," he said, his voice roughened by the wind and the strain of holding too much in. "Just a bruise." Clara made a sound that was almost a sigh, almost a laugh, but carried no humor. "You said that yesterday, and the day before." He turned then, straightening despite the protest from his ribs. The pain flared hot and immediate, but he swallowed it down, letting it settle back into its familiar throb. He'd learned how to stand like nothing was wrong, how to hold his shoulders right and his face still. His father had taught him that without ever saying the words. Clara stood a few steps away, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders against the cold. The light caught in her dark hair, already slipping loose from the pins that never seemed to hold by the end of a long day. Her hands were bare, red from work, fingers marked with small cuts and calluses that matched his own. There was worry in her face, open and unguarded. She had never been good at hiding it, and he had never been good at seeing it without feeling something twist inside him. "A ranch don't wait because a man's sore," Eli said. "That calf's out there." "I know," she replied. "I helped you look for it." "But you're hurt," she said, and this time there was no arguing tone, no edge, just fact. "Hurt ain't dead." She held his gaze, unblinking. "No, but it can lead there." The words settled between them, heavier than the dusk. Eli felt something tighten in his chest that had nothing to do with his ribs. He looked away first, toward the arroyo cutting through the land in the distance, dark and jagged. He had lost things there before. Time, blood, pride. "I'll be quick," he said, reaching for the rope coiled over the fence post. The familiar weight of it promised control, purpose. Just need to pull it back. Then I'll rest. Clara stepped forward, faster than he expected, and placed her hand over his before he could lift the rope. Her touch was warm, grounding, and for a moment it stopped him more effectively than any pain. He felt the calluses on her palm, the strength there, earned honestly. The contact made him flinch, not because it hurt, but because it reached somewhere he kept locked. "Eli," she said, softer now. "You don't always have to prove it." He looked down at their joined hands. The wind stirred her shawl, brushed a loose strand of hair across her cheek. The world seemed to narrow to that small point of contact. Memories rose uninvited. His father in the field long after his back had given out, refusing help, refusing rest. His mother's quiet strength, her hands always busy, always sore. The long years after they were gone, when this land had been all he had left to answer to. "I ain't proving anything," he muttered. "It's just work." Clara searched his face as if she could see past the lines he wore there, past the habit of silence. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "You don't have to carry it all yourself." Something in him pushed back hard, instinctive and sharp. Alone was simple. Alone was survivable. Alone didn't ask him to change. He gently pulled his hand free from hers, not meeting her eyes as he lifted the rope and settled it over his shoulder. "Don't make this harder than it is," he said. She stepped back, her hands curling into the edge of her shawl. "I'm not," she replied. "You are." He turned away before he could answer, before the truth in her words could sink too deep. The rope thudded softly against his back as he started toward the open field. Each step sent a dull ache through his side, spreading outward like a slow fire. He welcomed it in a strange way. Pain was something he could understand. Pain had rules. Behind him, Clara called his name once. Just once. He stopped but didn't turn. "Please," she said. The word hit him harder than the wind, harder than the bruise. He stood there, staring at the wide land stretching out under the darkening sky, the stars just beginning to prick through. For a heartbeat, he imagined dropping the rope, imagined walking back, imagined listening. The thought scared him more than the pain ever could. Somewhere ahead, the calf bawled again, frightened and alone. The sound pulled at him, gave him an excuse. Eli tightened his grip on the rope. "I'll be fine," he said, and walked on. The grass whispered against his boots as he moved, dry and brittle. The wind picked up, colder now, pressing against his chest, urging him forward. His breath came shallower as the ache sharpened, but he kept his pace steady. Slowing felt like weakness. Stopping felt like giving something up he wasn't ready to lose. As he reached the edge of the arroyo, the ground dipped suddenly, and he stumbled, catching himself on a fence post. Pain flared white-hot through his side, stealing his breath. He leaned there longer than he meant to, head bowed, rope slipping slightly in his grip. For a moment, the land spun, and Clara's voice echoed in his mind, clear as if she were standing beside him. "It still hurts there." He squeezed his eyes shut, jaw clenched, until the world steadied. When he straightened, the pain was still there, pulsing, but it hadn't beaten him yet. He tightened his hold on the rope and looked down into the dark cut of the arroyo where the calf's cries echoed. Whatever waited beyond this pain, whatever Clara was asking him to face, would have to wait. Tonight, there was work to finish.